Well, good morning and happy Sunday. It's been our first week of fall here, and it's been a beautiful week. It's been wonderful weather, and at least for me, it's my favorite time of the year. And to see the leaves changing and the cold mornings and whatnot, it's very enjoyable. And I hope you've had a great week. This coming weekend is Thanksgiving. One of the things that we do in our in-person services here on our Thanksgiving weekend is give people an opportunity to stand up and to say thanks, to state the things that they're thankful for, and not to myself or to someone else in the congregation, but mostly to God is our intention there, that we would give thanks to God and see the opportunities and the things that He has done for us. And regardless of whatever situation you find yourself in, if you are in Christ, you have a lot more to say thank you for than you do to complain about. So in this coming week, I would encourage you to take some time and to sit back and think about, and in your own prayer, in your own reflection and devotion, to thank God because, well, He is a wonderful God and He's worthy of our praise, is He not? We are continuing our study of the book of Ecclesiastes. We find ourselves in chapter 5, looking at verses 8 through 20 today. And I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. It reads, "If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter, for the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is a gain for the land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is a vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is a father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all of his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given to him. For this is his lot. Everyone to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God, for he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart." That's our text for today. And as I looked at it and studied it over the last while there, I've broken it up into 4 areas. The first 3 are kind of tiers of a problem. Tiers is in levels, right? And the preacher, the writer of this text, he does this quite often where he'll give us a problem, and then he'll either give us another problem or an expansion upon that problem as he has here, or he'll present an attempt to answer the problem that falls flat, and he shows us how it falls flat, but then he finally does come and he answers the problem. And so in this text, I see 3 problems that are expanded upon. They're all interconnected and they're all tied to one another, and they almost lead to each other. But then he does not leave us in our darkness of this problem, but he actually does come back and answers it as well. The first one is a little political, and not in the way that you might first think when I say that we're going to talk about politics. When I say that statement of we're going to talk about politics, some people get way too excited and some people pull back and get a little reserved. Firstly, let me say this, and I've said this before, but this is one of those topics that brings division. where you might have a different political view than your brother or sister in the pew might have. I've said this many times before, and I'll continue to say it again. It's a good point that should often be made, is that our unity in Christ should override any disunity that we do have. And so while you might have a different political view or political leaning than someone else, if you are a Christian and if they are a Christian, your unity should really just overcome, destroy almost any sense of disunity that you might have. You should be able to put that aside and say, we might disagree here, but really this doesn't matter nearly as much as our unity in Christ. So there's that. I'm not going to take one side or another here, because the truth is, well, the text doesn't. And also it kind of points to all of them being a problem, or at least a very common that most of them would be a problem. See, it's talking about evil people in leadership, in governmental leadership especially. And it says not to be surprised by this. The text opens up, right? And it says, if you see in the province, or in a province, the oppression of the poor, the violation of justice and righteousness. So this is when we examine the government of a place, and we see that the poor are being oppressed. They're not being cared for. They're not being treated well. They're being oppressed, and that could be in a varying ways. Then the violation of justice, that justice is not being handed out. It's not being taken care of properly, that the system in place is either failing, or the policies that they have put in place to deal with justice is not just. And then righteousness, that righteousness is not there. Morality is not found there, that these things are falling short. And what does the text tell us? Because we would hope for, maybe we wouldn't actually expect if we've spent enough time on this earth, but we would hope for, in an ideal situation, that the poor would not be oppressed. We would hope that justice would be upheld, and we would hope that righteousness would be found throughout the levels of government and the levels of society. But it says, do not be amazed at the matter. Don't be surprised by this. Why would you be surprised by this? This is common. This is what Solomon is writing here. And it was common then, and it's common now. And it's not that it's, this side is corrupt and this side is glorious. There's a lot of problems on both sides. And the reality is that a lot of people get into this line of work for the wrong reasons. Or they get into the line of work for the right reason. But they get a little taste of power. They get a little taste of a personal benefit. Or they simply see everyone else that they work with entrenched in corruption. And so, I may as well too. I'm not really going to make a difference here. And so they get involved in that, and it's a horrible thing. So it's not one side or another. It's a human issue. It's found on both sides of the aisle where people get into these problems. The text says to not be amazed at it, that they have a higher official over them, and that over that person there's another higher official. And there's this ladder, as you can picture it, of different supervisors at different levels of government. And isn't that interesting? Because the supervisor should be one to supervise and make sure that those under him are working appropriately and engaging policy and lobbying for those who are under them and representing their people well and voting appropriately and whatnot. But what we see here is not that happening. That this guy's corrupt, but the guy above him is corrupt, and the guy above him is corrupt. And so if they're training those underneath them to follow in their footsteps, obviously the corruption will continue. And so we have that. In verse 9, it's a little interesting. It's interesting to me anyhow. In verse 9, in the English Standard Version, which is what I read from, it says, "But this is a gain for the land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields." And so we have this picture, and how I read it, we have this picture of these officials are corrupted, but, so in contrast, but what is good for the land, what is good for the land in every way, is a king committed to cultivated fields. And that makes sense to me. A king who's committed to cultivated fields, who's committed to a good harvest. If a good harvest happens, then everyone gets fed. The king and his officials get fed, but so do the poor, so do the farmers, so do the common folk. They all get taken care of. Now, in studying scripture, a good practice to do is to look at multiple translations. If you're English, you're looking at the English language, and so that's what I did. I opened up the NASB. I have a tendency towards the ESV. Pastor Tim has a tendency towards the NASB, the 95 edition. So I opened that one up, and it says, after all, a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land. But after all and but are two different words. And I read this as but meaning in contrast, right? These people are doing this, but a good king is doing this. But after all would mean a continuation of the point. So you have these governmental leaders who are corrupt, and after all, the king himself. And as I continue to read, so the CSB, which is the Christian Standard Bible, says the profit from the land is taken by all, the king is served by the field. So the king is now benefiting from the field as well. The NLT, the New Living Translation, says even the king milks the land for his own profits. So they're pushing harder into the area of even the king is corrupt in this area. The NIV, the increase from the land is taken by all, the king himself profits from the fields. Okay, what's taken by all, so all benefit from it. The king himself also. And then the King James Version for those who like the old school there. Moreover, the profit of the earth is for all, the king himself is served by the field. And so as I was looking at this, I thought, well, it seems like it's saying one of two things. It's either saying you have corruption at all these levels, but a good king would do this, or you have corruption at all these levels, and even the king himself is taking personal benefit from it. And I'm left with the question of, well, what is this saying? And one of the tools that I use in my study is Logos Bible software, which I recommend. It's a wonderful software. It's expensive, but it's good. And sometimes, you can put your cursor over a verse and there's like a little number there that gives you a note on it. And this had that. So I thought, this is wonderful. So I put my cursor over it and it said, the meaning of this Hebrew verse is unknown. And I thought, well, that's great. But as I spent time on it, maybe too much time on this verse now looking back in retrospect, I realized it could be saying one of two things, but in a way it's really saying the same thing. Because it's either saying, don't be surprised when you see corruption in the government and even the king himself is corrupt. Or it's saying, don't be surprised when you see corruption in the government, but in an ideal situation, in a good situation, the king would be focused on everyone else or focused on taking care of his people. And really, foundationally, they're saying the same thing, that this is how it should be. But don't be surprised if it's like this. Don't be surprised if there's oppression. If justice and righteousness is not being upheld. Don't be surprised by that. The selfish, evil, greedy leader, he doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about your pantry. He only cares that his pantry is stocked. But a good king will be committed to the fields because he knows that if the harvest is good, then all will be fed, including himself, but those that are under his care. History has shown this to us, that those who work in leadership for the people and who put the people first, that they produce a society that is stable. But when the people are cared for and needs are met and life is good. But those who are in leadership for selfish gain, that they are not a government for the people, that they are a government for themselves. They don't lobby, they don't vote for their people, but they only work to line their own pockets and to build up their own power. That creates difficulties and an unstable society. It was common then, and it's common now. And the common denominator is that there's people involved, that people are corrupt, people are evil, people are selfish. And that's how this goes. And we looked in previous texts of Ecclesiastes, and it made this point that our work and our resources and our riches should primarily be used to care for those that are in our care, that we should take care of those that we have been entrusted to. And that's the same with the government. That's the same with the king. He should use what he has to take care of those in his care. When he doesn't, well, it's very common that that doesn't happen properly. Does the king promote industries that are foundational and benefit those under him, or just ones that increase his own wealth and his own positions? But tied to that is the question of what is the drive behind these people who will abuse their power for the cost of the masses, who will allow society and the people that they're supposed to care for to go through such great hardship just to line their own pocket? What's the drive behind that? And as I said, the three problems that are given to us in our text today, they expand upon one each other. And so the following text expands on that. It says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. The drive comes from a love of money, power, wealth, and status. And it's a never satisfied thing. It's a never-ending hole. It's like someone trying to fill a hole with their shovel, but there's no bottom to it. It just goes and goes and goes, and there's no satisfaction to be found in these things, yet it's often the very thing that people will search for satisfaction in. As we've seen in earlier sections of Ecclesiastes, that's just it. Satisfaction is not found in wealth. It's not found in status, and it's not found in personal gain. It's not found in positions. It's very countercultural to think that way. And if you think about our culture, especially in a North American context, society is always pushing this idea of you need that new thing. Oh, go out and buy that new car, or take that loan out to get this thing, buy the bigger house, get that new pair of shoes, buy that shiny thing, and this materialism of you need that new thing. And it's so common. People have this idea of, I'm having a bad day, so I'm just going to go buy something to make myself feel good. And that doesn't work. And it's not really that they're chasing or seeking out a new thing. It's not like the next toy is the thing that they actually want, or the new car, or the new phone, or that new shirt, or something like that. It's a sense of fulfillment that is said to come with that thing, but it never arrives. And so it's this hunger for something that's not going to be found there. And so they're never satisfied. They're never satisfied with their money. They always want more, thinking that if I can just get to that next bracket, if I can just get that next raise, if I can just get that next thing, then I'll be satisfied. Then I'll have joy. Then I'll have fulfillment. And it never arrives, because those things, joy, fulfillment, satisfaction, is not found in the pursuit of wealth or status or personal gain. The text continues to expand the problem. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is the father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and he shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. So here we have the example of someone who had wealth, but they lost it all in a bad venture. Maybe he's gambled on a risky investment, and he loses everything. He loses all of it. But probably, and you can think about this about your own investment or your own risk and gambles and things that you've done with money, or you've seen other people do, or you can, if you know history, you can see that through history, that there's a sense of excitement, that this person is saying to himself, I'm going to put all my eggs here, I'm going to put all my wealth here. And if this pays off, I'm going to be rich. Like, I'm going to have it all. And it doesn't work out. And he loses it all. And how devastating that must be. But to further the point of how devastating this is, the text tells us that in this hypothetical, but often reality situation, this is the father of a son. He's supposed to use what he has to care for his family, and instead he was risky with it, and he loses it all. And so how is he to care for those who he's supposed to care for? And then comes the reminder of the grave. This guy's going to die, and he's not going to be able to bring anything with him. Naked he came, naked he'll go. And it's a good reminder for us that in the grave, the treasure that's stored up here, we don't bring with us. Jesus, in his teachings, he had a parable that he taught that commented on this, or really was focused on this, of a man who had so much stuff. And he was worried about, what am I going to do with all my stuff? And he's having sleepless nights. And finally he comes up with the idea, I'm going to build a bigger barn. And so he builds this massive barn, and he gets all of his stuff in there, and he's able to lock it all in, and it's safe. No one can come and touch his stuff. And it says that he laid down and basically says to himself, now I can rest. My stuff is secure. And he dies that night. And he's standing before God. And the question is posed, what good is that stuff now? It's not. It's not at all. It doesn't go with you. I can remember when I was in China, and there was this festival that we were there for, this holiday called Qingming. Might be pronouncing it wrong, but I know I'm close to it. Qingming. And they would go and they would honor their ancestors and sweep the grave sites and clean up the grave sites. But we went into this Qingming store just to look at it and learn about the culture and whatnot. And in this store is a bunch of paper things. You can spend your real money to buy paper money. You can spend your money to buy paper food and paper apples and paper cars and paper clothing and paper houses and all this stuff. And what they would do is they'd go to the graveside, or they'd go somewhere, and they would burn these things. You would spend your real money to buy paper things, to then burn those things in hope that by burning this paper money or this paper car or this paper house, that money, car, and house would then go to your dead ancestors. I'll tell you right now, that doesn't work. That's not how that doesn't happen. There's nothing we carry with us here into the next. And so hyper fixation on building up treasure here is really pointless. It doesn't lead anywhere. It's wrong. It shouldn't be our focus. The text says in this last statement that he eats in darkness, in vexation. For those who don't know, I know in our congregation with some folks that English isn't their first language, vexation, a deep sense of frustration, sickness and anger. And I understand why. I mean, this person has pursued fulfillment and failed in that pursuit, thinking that he missed out not just on the riches, but that sense of, if I can just get that next thing, then life will be good. Now, he never actually was going to get that from that wealth, but he fell short on that. And so there's this frustration, and there's the darkness, and there's this sickness, and just this anger of, man, I can't find fulfillment, and I'm trying and I'm failing, and I'm never reaching what I'm chasing after, right? This whole vanity, chasing after the wind. I imagine how exhausting that is and frustrating that is to constantly be going after something and never arriving at it. The preacher has painted a picture of the pursuit of money, wealth, and status and its effects. And it's not good. It leads to selfishness. It leads to corruption. It leads to a lack of content, to a never-ending pursuit of the next thing. And it leads to those in your care struggling because you're willing to compromise so much to get that next thing. And it never arrives. And so then it leads to anger, darkness, frustration, and sickness. And even if you build up some grand treasure here, it doesn't follow you there. And so Jesus, at the end of his parable teachings, the message of it was, don't build up treasure in earth that dust and moths and time will destroy, but rather store up your treasure in heaven. We'll talk about that another day. But then the preacher, as I said, he doesn't leave us hanging. He does come through with the answer. He says, behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given to him. For this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot, and to rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. Think about your work. Not just your employment, but your work. The text here uses the word toil, but work. Toil, labor, the tasks that you have in the home, in society, in your employment. Do you find enjoyment in those things? You know, how you think about something can really impact your attitude about it and how you see it. We recently moved, and in my life, I've moved a number of times. We moved from Ontario to Nova Scotia, and then as a child, we lived in 3 houses that I can remember in Cole Harbour. Then I moved here to Sackville. Then I went off to college. Now, as a kid, I mean, we moved, but I don't know what I did. I probably was sent to some friend's house or something, and they moved all the boxes, and it's not really a task. And then in college, like, all my stuff could fit in the back seat of a car almost, and so there wasn't much to that. But now I have a wife and 3 kids, and it was not necessarily an easy task. And those of you who've moved recently, you can reflect on that. And you're packing boxes and you're cleaning things. And I painted the kitchen cabinetry at the new place, and I mowed the grass that hadn't been mowed in a long time, and we cut the tree down and cut it up into sections. And so I'm putting the wood into the wood shed, and we're doing all this various things and putting shelves up and whatnot. And it is a good amount of work, and thank you to those who were able to help me with that task. But I've been studying Ecclesiastes for almost a year now. And so, well, sure, I had moments of frustration and moments of tiredness and whatnot like that. But a lot of the time, Ecclesiastes haunted my mind as I was doing these tasks. And I'm pushing the lawnmower through this grass that hasn't been cut in too long of a time. And that could have been a frustrating thing, but instead I'm thinking my children are going to be running through this backyard that we didn't get to have before and playing kind of thing. And I'm moving wood into the woodshed, and I'm thinking that, we'll be able to have campfires, or in the wood stove, we'll be able to heat our home with this. And it's providing for my family. It's caring for my family. And to have that mindset, moving gravel or putting shelves up and seeing how my wife's able to turn this shell of a house into a cozy, beautiful home for us to live in, to enjoy your toil, to see the big picture of what you're doing and why you're doing it. I'm doing this to provide for my family. I'm doing this to care for my family. I'm doing this to further the kingdom of God. I'm doing this and if you can look at it and have the proper attitude, it can actually bring honor to God. God has asked us to care for those who we are to care for, to take care of your wife, to take care of your children, to take care of those who are put into your care. And so if you do that properly, you're also honoring God, because you're listening to God, and He's worthy of us to listen to Him, is He not? And so your tasks, when you see them, do you rejoice in them? Do you have that mindset of what I'm doing now, there's a bigger picture to it? When you're cooking supper, when you're packing lunches, cutting the grass, filling out expense forms, putting the kids to bed, stacking wood, washing dishes, pushing your kid on the swing, tending the garden, folding laundry, taking the trash out, and yes, when you're working at your employment, when you're working at your job to bring home a paycheck to go buy some groceries or to pay for the heat in the house and to pay your mortgage or your rent kind of thing. For that is the lot that you were dealt. That's the situation that you've been given. That's the life that you've been put into. And it's a gift from God. The text makes that statement that it's the lot that we have been given it's a gift from God, and it's really this simple message of be content. Don't spend your life chasing the next thing. Don't spend your life trying to get to the next ring of that ladder, but be content with where God has put you. God might move you up in the sense of society and wealth and status and whatnot. He might move you down. But to be content where God has put you and to just take the lot, take the life that God has given to you and to enjoy it and to use it properly. Enjoy what you have. Don't spend your life chasing the wind, but whether you have much or you have little, to enjoy your toil. As I said, to accept what God has given to you, for it is His gift to you. Don't be like a spoiled child who receives a gift and then instantly puts it down and just wants that next thing, wants to go after the next thing. That's a whole, that child needs some discipline in their life, but rather to be able to hold what God has given to you and say, thank you, and to enjoy it, to embrace it, to be content with what God has given to you. And what does that mean? If you are content in what God has given you and you are enjoying the work that you do, the ending there, the last verse is kind of interesting, right? It says that you will not remember the days of your life because God has filled your heart with joy. Well, what's that mean? Well, it means this. You won't spend all of your time focusing on the past of all of the I should have, I could have, I would have kind of things. And you won't spend all your nights laying in your bed thinking about all the problems that you're going to face tomorrow and how can I get, how can I increase my salary and how can I do this and how can I get that thing, and always focusing on tomorrow. But you'll actually be able to live in the moment of where you are and use the resources that you have as you have them and take care of those that you've been entrusted to. And your heart will be full of joy because you'll be living content. Not focused on what could have been and not focused on what you think will be, but rather just being where you are and knowing that God is in control and being content with the life that He has given to you. Be content and understand that fulfillment comes from being in proper relationship with God, in living a life where you accept what He has given to you and you steward it and use it well. It's not found in those other things. And that's why those who are focused on the next big thing or increasing wealth and all these other things, they don't have joy, and they're always focused on yesterday or tomorrow, so they're never present in today. That's our text for today. I hope as we go through this next week that you'll be able to slow down. And as you're folding laundry or as you're at work or as you're doing whatever task it is that you find yourself doing, you'll say, I'm thankful that I'm doing this. May I honor you in all that I do. Have a great week. And as I just said, but as I usually close with, just that. Honor God in all that you do.